Hey everyone, it's Professor Babcock. Welcome to our online version of nonverbal communication. So, okay, still getting used to it. There we go. All right, so here's our definition of nonverbal communication, which is any symbolic behavior other than written or spoken language that is either intentionally or unintentionally sent and is interpreted by the receiver. Okay, so what this means is you cannot not communicate. All right, let me say that again. You cannot not communicate. So anything that we do, an eye twitch, a glance, a yawn, has the potential, anyway, to communicate something if someone attaches meaning to it, even if we didn't intend to be sending a message. So a lot of times when you guys are sitting in the class and I'm looking out at you, you're not intending to send me any meaning aside from the fact that you are sitting in class, attending class. And there are some of you who look bored, or some of you who look interested, or some of you who look confused. And you may or not be intending to send me those messages, but they're being interpreted nonetheless. So it gets a little confusing. So let's talk about the nature of nonverbal communication for a couple of minutes. How large a role does nonverbal communication play? Well, it plays a huge role in our face-to-face communication. So what research tells us is that at least 65% of our face-to-face communication is actually surrounding our nonverbal behaviors that accompany our verbal messages. So hopefully our nonverbals are enhancing or helping us to send our intentions accurately. And nonverbals are the reason why sometimes there are misunderstandings on social media. So Twitter or email or texting, because those nonverbals, particularly about tone, are missing. And this is when we realize how important our nonverbals are, is when we don't have even the opportunity to send them. And it gets a little bit confusing. So the other piece about the nature of nonverbals is that they can be ambiguous. So for several different reasons, nonverbal communication can be unclear. So for example, if you're looking at this girl's expression, it's hard to tell what she's feeling. It is kind of a neutral expression, but it could be conveying something. We're not really sure. And that's because of the ambiguity of nonverbals. All right, the other thing about the ambiguousness of nonverbals is that many nonverbals have multiple meanings. So if you look at this family, and in particular you look at who I assume is the mom in the middle here, that facial expression, the way her face is composed, it could mean several things, particularly the eye contact. Is she tired? Is she sad? Has some trauma happened that she's processing, or is it something else? That particular combination of nonverbals, in particular the eye contact, could have multiple meanings. And the last reason why nonverbals are ambiguous is that they are very culture bound. So the same or similar gesture may have a different meaning based on our culture. So in a lot of cultures, particularly our culture, we value eye contact. In other cultures, some Asian cultures, direct eye contact, or a lot of direct eye contact, is considered disrespectful. So you've got to be aware of the cultural differences. Here on this slide, we've got two folks flashing their hands using the same gesture, a V. And that person up there at the top is Winston Churchill. And the meaning that he is intending to send is a victory sign. So using your hand in that way in the context of World War II meant victory. The girl below, I'm pretty sure, is not intending to convey any World War II related meaning. Okay, she's using it as peace. That is the sort of the gesture that came out of the 1960s hippie movement. She's flashing the peace sign. Okay, so again, that can make it a little confusing because our nonverbals are culture bound. Okay, let's move on to categories of nonverbal communication. And there are several that we're going to talk about today, although your book talks about a couple of others, and there are others even that your book doesn't discuss. So today we're going to talk about kinesics, proxemics, artifacts, and paralanguage. So first, let's talk about kinesics, which is all sorts of different categories of body movement. So the way we use our bodies to communicate. And kinesics includes eye contact, facial expressions, posture, our gestures, and other body movements. So let's talk about eye contact. In Western cultures, as I said before, we really value eye contact. We even indicate that importance in the way we talk about eye contact. So we might say things like, look at me when I'm talking to you. Or we might say, he can't even look me in the eye. And that's a bad thing. Okay, somebody not looking at you in the eye is bad. So if we walked into any company in the United States and walked into a meeting in a conference room, even if we didn't know anything about the folks in the room, we would probably be able to tell who's the boss and who the workers are just on eye contact. So the other thing about the way eye contact is used in our culture is that high status people use eye contact much more than people who in a given context would be lower status. So in that conference room, we could assume that the person who is doing the best job at looking people in the eye is the boss, and that the folks who are maybe looking at their boss but also averting their gaze are the workers, because that's how eye contact tends to be used in our culture. So you can look at these three photos on the slide, and just from the eye contact, you can get an idea about what's going on. In that top photo, the eye contact of the woman, she looks angry to me. In the middle photo, you've got, now they're very close together, but that's not romantic interest. That is good job, we're doing well. You can tell that's probably coach and obviously a player. And even though the two men in the middle photo are physically very close to each other, like the two people in the bottom photo, we can tell just from the eye contact that those two sets of people have very different relationships. The folks in the bottom are in a romantic relationship, we would assume, from the eye contact that we can see on the woman. So eye contact gives us a lot of information. Okay, moving on to facial expressions. Again, we indicate what we think about facial expressions in the way we talk about it. So often we'll talk about having a poker face, and whether it's in the context of a poker game or in the context of some other relationship, we're aware that we can give away emotion based on what our facial expressions look like. And again, this is highly culture bound. Americans prefer lots of facial animation. And this is one of the reasons why when we're getting ready for speeches, I try to remember to tell you at the beginning of class for audience members to give good face. And that's because when you're the speaker and you get up and you walk down to the front of the class and you turn around and you look back at the audience, if everybody's face looks neutral, that's disconcerting because we are used to lots of animation in our facial expressions when we're in regular conversation with each other. So one of the more prominent researchers in facial expression research is a man named Paul Ekman, and he's done a lot of research on what he calls microexpressions. And at the beginning of this research process, he discovered 7 expressions that he determined were sort of universal across culture. So the way people facially express anger, facially express fear, disgust, happiness, sadness, surprise. What Ekman says is that it doesn't matter whether you're American, whether you're Japanese, whether you're Nigerian, that for those 7 emotions, there are a universal set of microexpressions that indicate those feelings. And he's continued to do research, and he's come up with some more expressions that he thinks are universally displayed. But what I'd like you to do is, this is just a 2-minute clip of the folks behind the Fox show Lie to Me, where they talk about Ekman's facial expression theory. Okay, I'm assuming you're back after watching the YouTube video, and so next we're going to talk about another category of kinesics, which is gestures. And so the thing about gestural communication is that it can convey meaning all on its own. So, for example, emblems are things that we don't need any additional verbal message in order to decode the meaning. So in that picture at the top of the screen where the woman is holding her finger up in front of her lips, we know that that means please be quiet, please stop talking. Now often it's accompanied by a sh sound, which is also a nonverbal. It's called paralanguage, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. The paralanguage of the sh in combination with the finger in front of the lips conveys the please be quiet meaning, but you don't need the sh. That particular emblem is so strong in our culture that we would be able to easily understand it even without the accompanying sh sound. The middle gesture, the hand pointing, is called an illustrator, and that does accompany a verbal message, and it helps provide context. So if you're giving somebody directions, you would often point as you're giving your directions to try and enhance the meaning. When you're telling your fish story, you've gone out fishing and you come back and you tell your friends and family how big your fish was, and you gesture widely because you caught a big fish. You might be lying, but you're gesturing in order to help us understand how big at least you want us to think the fish was that you caught. And then the third category of these kinds of gestures are adapters. And these are messages that we're not sending intentionally. So remember, with nonverbal communication, you cannot not communicate. So adapters are things like chewing on fingernails, twirling your hair, swaying back and forth, fidgeting with something like a ring or cards if you're giving a speech in class. And this is one of the major reasons why we have you watch your videos of your speeches, because we know that particularly when we're under stress or feeling anxious, we will use these adapters. When we don't use them intentionally, they just kind of come out. And it's hard to adjust that if you're not aware that you're doing it. So that's one of the reasons why videos are so useful. Okay, let's move on from kinesics and talk about the second category, which is proxemics, or the way that we use space. And we're talking about space in, our interaction with one another. And this is, again, very culture bound, and what you've got in your textbook is Edward Hall's proximate zones, and these only make sense in an American or North American context. And so he's got 4 zones, and these are generalizations. Obviously, you can cross into any of these zones with different meaning, but in general, intimate zone is reserved for your closest friends, or if you are sort of whispering to somebody, telling a secret, that there's some sort of confidential context about your communication. And so intimate zone is 0, so touching each other, to about 1.5 feet. And then the personal zone is used by good friends, or when you want to communicate what's called affiliation. So if you're patting somebody on the back, to say good job, or if you are a baseball player or some other team member and you tap somebody on the butt, it doesn't have a sexual connotation. It has a good job connotation. So affiliation. And that's about 1.5 feet to 4 feet. Social zone is the zone that we use with acquaintances, so people we know, but people we may not know very well, who we wouldn't consider to be in our close friendship group. Or social zone is also when we're conducting business with strangers, so the things that we do on a daily basis. And the social zone is about 4 feet to 12 feet, and you're looking at some photographs on the bottom there that give examples of the social zone. And so, again, the way we use the space around us, with people around us, is based on how comfortable we feel with the person. It's based on what our culture is. And if you're people watching, we make a lot of, we create perceptions about what people's relationships are based on how close they are standing with each other. And this is one of the things that when people make mistakes about proxemics, it makes other people very uncomfortable. So think about close talkers, the people who violate our space bubble. Those are folks who, for whatever reason, they don't quite get our common cultural understanding of how close you're allowed to stand to one another. If I, during class, went in and stood in front of one student's desk and put my hand, stood there with my hand on their desk for the entire class, that would eventually, very quickly, be uncomfortable for all of you, even the folks that I'm physically far away from, because I would be violating that one student's zone, their personal space bubble. Okay, let's move on to our third category, which is artifacts. So the objects that we display. Usually we're talking about objects on our bodies, but we could also be talking about the objects we display in our dorm rooms, our homes, apartments, our offices. Again, whether we intend them to or not, these convey something about ourselves. Again, we cannot not communicate. So even if you are intentionally getting dressed in a way that indicates that you don't care about labels, for example, that act conveys something about you. It conveys, artifacts convey who we are, who we'd like to be. And so think about, for the things that we have on our bodies, think about all the things we weren't born with. That's sort of what you need to think about in terms of artifacts. So the clothes that we wear, how conservative are they? How risque are they? Our hairstyle, is it styled? Is it not styled? Is it styled in a conservative manner? Is it styled in a way that would really stick out in a crowd? Do we have tattoos? Where are the tattoos? How big are they? Are they just for us or people we're intimate with, or do we intend them to be seen by everyone? Jewelry. What kind of jewelry? How large is the jewelry? Makeup. How much makeup are we wearing? When do we wear it? All of those things convey something about us. And so if you look at the two women on the screen, I think most of you would agree that the woman on the right is dressed more conservatively than the woman on the left. So she's wearing a salmon colored sweater that is it's got a high neck and longish sleeves. And so she's not showing a lot of skin. She's got on a cute skirt, but she's also got leggings. So she doesn't have bare legs. We can't really tell if she's coloring her hair. If she is, she's coloring it so that it looks natural. She's got, a big bag. It looks, conservative. And then you compare that to the woman on the left, who has, not only is she wearing something that has just very skinny straps and is quite low cut, but even at the top of the cami there, it's lace. So it's kind of peekabooing even more of her chest. She's got a really large Hello Kitty tattoo on her chest. Obviously, she's coloring her hair in a way that she's intending to stand out in a crowd. She's wearing earrings that are large and easily seen. We can't really see any jewelry on the other person. And she's got some makeup on that we can see. And the other woman does not have makeup that is jumping out at us. So again, fair or not, when we look at these two women, we probably come to different kinds of conclusions about who they are, what their social class is, what their background might be. So it's hard to get away from the way we look at the artifacts people have chosen. And we must acknowledge that people make judgments about that. So that's something to be aware of. Okay, so the last category we're going to discuss is paralanguage. And this is the way that we use vocal elements to enhance or modify the meaning of the words that we say. So these are things like pitch, rate, volume, vocal quality, articulation and diction, and vocal disfluencies and fillers. So the importance of paralanguage is one of the reasons why I ask you to use a conversational delivery style when you're giving your speeches. So what happens if you have a script that you memorize, unless you're really aware of the difference between a memorized script and a truly conversational delivery style, what happens is the cues, the paralanguage cues, are very different for a memorized script as opposed to a truly conversational delivery. And so that word for word scripted memorization, the vocal cues, the paralanguage cues actually make it harder for the listeners to understand what you mean, because those cues are different. And so your listener has to work harder to stay with you and to understand what you mean. And one of the things you want to do as a speaker when you're in a public speaking context is to think about very consciously, how can you make it easy for your audience to understand what you mean and how quickly they're able to understand what you mean. So that's one of the reasons why it's so important and why I focus on that with your delivery. In a non-public speaking context, paralanguage, the cues, the way our voice, how loud, the volume, how soft, where our tone is, where the pitch is, those can give us cues about our feelings. Sometimes, though, paralanguage, especially if we're using things like sarcasm, can make it really difficult to interpret meaning. So I've got one more clip for you to watch. This is a couple of minutes of Sheldon on The Big Bang Theory. Sheldon, it's a recurring theme on the show that Sheldon has a hard time decoding sarcasm. So go out and watch that clip and then come on back and I'm going to wrap the conversation up. All right, guys, I'm going to assume that you've gone out and watched that last clip from The Big Bang Theory. So that's a very quick version of nonverbal communication. Thanks for watching all the way through. And now I'd like you to go take a look at the nonverbal communication field assignment. Now that you've watched this video, that should help you with the assignment. And I'll see you when I come back from my conference. Bye-bye.